After you've annealed your ring shank, just take your rawhide hammer and your ring mandrel and push your ring around considerably smaller than the size it's going to be. And you can see how I've brought the ends like this rather than trying to make them fit perfectly. So I'm just going to hammer this, make sure it's at the correct size. If your mandrel has sizes on it, then it's quite easy to just hammer it until it is the correct size. This is the correct size now, and what I can do is just rest my ring on there, rest the setting on there, and I can see where I need to cut the ring shank so that it fits on the ring at the right size. So I'm just going to take a texture, a Sharpie, and mark it. And then what I do is I put it in an old style ring clamp. And that way I can saw and file right on the clamp. So cut just slightly proud of the clamp, and then you can use your Swiss number 2 cut, flat hand file, and you'll get both of these flat at the same time. And the trick to knowing if it's correct is if you place it on a flat surface and it stands up by itself, you'll know that it's flat enough and straight enough that you'll get a good solder joint. So now it's time to solder it on. Well, first you just check to make sure that it fits onto the ring, and that looks good. So now we'll solder it. I'm just holding the ring in place using my third hand, and you can take your straight edge and position it to make sure you got your ring shank straight up and down, because sometimes your eyes lie to you and you think it's straight and it's not. So use the old tried and true straight edge method. When it's lined up correctly, flux just at the spots where the 2 bits of metal touch. If you want to keep any fire scale off, you can just cover the whole piece with flux. I'm not worried about the shank itself because it's easy to polish the fire scale off. And a piece of solder, hard solder once again, the width of the ring shank. Place it with your flux brush. and we want it so that it just nestles in where the two bits of metal touch. And if we keep it at that spot, there'll be very little or no cleanup when we're finished. So once again, dry out your flux. When it's dry, push your solder into place finally. And then we're just going to circle the base to the ring shank, the base to the ring shank. We want both the bits of metal to be the same temperature. And when they are, the solder will flow. We'll have a nice line all the way around. And then we'll quench, pickle, and have a really good look. Okay, we're out of the tumbler. It all looks pretty good to me. No cleanup needed on the inside. So we're ready to set our stone. I'm using a GRS bench vise for this because it's got no marks on the inside of the jaws. And for setting a ring like this, it's quite nice because this is flat, and you can put a bit of pressure down on this and not damage anything. So now we need to pop our stone in, and it needs to fit. You can't force it in. If you force it in, you'll break the stone. And you can see that it is a fairly nice fit. I'll come down here so you can see. You can see just by dropping that in like that, it fits everywhere, and it's just a matter of pushing it on down in, and we're ready to set it. And I usually just tap it until I can hear it hit the bottom. Sounds good. And you can use a bezel rocker if you want, which is one of these, to push the material over. And when you use one of these, it doesn't leave much of a mark on the bezel. And it just makes it that much easier to clean it up when you're finished. Now this was the part of the bezel that's not going to push over the stone, and it's really not a problem because there's enough everywhere else to push over the stone that it's not going to come out. If you have one that you're worried about the stone coming out because it doesn't have quite enough metal going over it, what you can do is put a drop of two-part epoxy underneath before you start pushing the bezel over. I quite like hammer setting, and that's just using a punch with a smooth end to tap that over, and I'll show you. This is just a smooth piece of steel, and I use the chasing hammer, and I just tap around the top edge of the stone, not the stone, the bezel. And you can see it quite easily. Pushes that even better against the stone. I actually prefer hammer setting because it's just a little more precise, and it lets you get in the small crevices better. So now after you get the bezel the way you like it, you can use a burnisher to smooth it off. And the burnisher, once again, is just a smooth piece of steel. And we just rub that. Get it so you can see. We just rub that like that, right on the edge of the bezel. And you can see how it makes it all nice and shiny. And that's the finish of it. Done.